ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שהכל נהיה בדברו. We are in a place in the Jewish calendar where we have already celebrated and commemorated Pesach. We commemorated Shavuot, and we can now think back about these festivities. In particular, I want to think about Pesach, the anniversary of the Exodus from Egypt. What are we supposed to think about when Pesach comes to mind? You know, there's one word, it's a concept that is horrible in Pesach. I think about the worst thing you can say in Pesach is something is chametz. Forget about violations. Chametz is the worst thing. What is chametz? Chametz means any kind of food that has fermented. You know, it has risen, the dough has risen. So therefore, you cannot use it in Pesach. Because when our ancestors went out of Egypt, they didn't wait for the dough to rise, but they baked flat breads immediately. So chametz is about the worst thing you can do. Rabbi Dov Linzer, who is the principal of the Yeshiva Chovevei Torah in New York City, one of my favorites, mentions the following, that in the Hasidic world, you know, chametz is equated, and many others also, with the Yetzer Hara. You know, it's something that has been already in some form transformed and is no longer pure. It has been vitiated. You know, when something is fermented, it's not in its original impure state. So that chametz is terrible. Maybe it has to do with ecology also, what we are doing to nature. Leave nature alone. It should be in its primitive state. Chametz is no good. So one questions, if that is so, why do we eat bread the rest of the year? Why do we abstain from fermented items only on Pesach? What about the rest of the year if it's so bad? Well, maybe there is an important lesson that the Hasidic world tried to instill, but the example isn't 100%. There's a great sage by the name of Netziv. His name was Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin. He was the father of a rabbi by the name of Meir Berlin, in whose memory the University Bar Ilan was founded, because this rabbi Meir Berlin was a great leader of the Mizrahi living in Israel. He changed his name to Bar Ilan. So Bar Ilan University bears that name. But I want to go back to the Netziv, the father of Rabbi Meir Bar Ilan. He says something very original, very interesting. He says the following. The word Pesach, the festivity of Pesach, is also called Shabbat in the Torah. As a matter of fact, that fact creates a whole problem, because the Bible reads, Mimocharat HaShabbat. How are you going to celebrate Shavuot? Shavuot, which is the anniversary of having received the Torah, has no date in the Bible. The Torah doesn't mention a date. It says the following. The following day of Shabbat, which according to our rabbis meant the first day of Pesach, you shall count 50 days. So we have a count of 49 days. On the 50th day, that's when Shavuot is. But then there was a section, a sector, maybe a sect in Judaism by the name of the Karaites. They said, no, it says Mimocharat HaShabbat. Shabbat means Saturday. In other words, if Pesach is Tuesday and Wednesday, you don't start counting from Wednesday, the second day of Pesach. You start counting from Sunday, after the first Shabbat after Pesach. That already created a problem. You know, when there is a difference of opinion about some intellectual issue, about a moral issue, when you can accept different points of view, what is the origin of the law, but when something practical is an implication of that, like when are you going to commemorate a holiday, that already creates a division in the Jewish people. So that was a very dangerous item. So our rabbis insisted, make sure that you interpret it right. Mimocharat HaShabbat means the second day of Pesach. The first day of Pesach is also called Shabbat. If that is so, says the Netziv, we see here there's something there, there's great affinity between the holiday of Pesach and the regular Shabbat that we celebrate every week. What are the two principles of this Shabbat? Well, it's contained in the Ten Commandments, The first time that the Ten Commandments are stated in the Torah, that's in Exodus, in Shemot. There it says, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat. Remember the day Shabbat. When the Ten Commandments are repeated in Deuteronomy and Devarim, there it says, Shamor et Yom HaShabbat. So once it says Zachor and once it says Shamor. So these are very important principles. So the question is, what are we supposed to remember on Pesach? What are the fundamentals that we're supposed to remember? Maybe the first thing we have to remember is that man was created in God's image. So you can't make a slave out of him. He's a very spiritual being. He has part of God in him. So that Pesach is a cry against slavery. But maybe it means something else also. When we start reading the Bible, we see that that Adam, the first man, disobeys God, and he eats of the fruit of the forbidden tree. So God tells him, why did you do that? He says, it was the woman that you gave me. She's the one that told me to eat. The woman says it was the serpent. Everybody says something else. What is the moral? The moral is that you have to assume responsibility. When you make a mistake, you have to say, I made a mistake. Don't blame it on somebody else because you did it. Why did you follow somebody else's counsel? Why didn't you follow the word of God? There's an episode of Cain killing his brother, Abel. God tells him, the blood of your brother is crying out to me. Cain says, am I my brother's keeper? Hashomer achi anochi? What do I have to do with this man? What is the reply? The reply is, yes, you are your brother's keeper. We are learning some very basic principles. We are learning a principle that man was created in the image of God. He should be free. We are learning that you have to assume responsibility. We are learning that you're responsible for your brother as well. Then comes a man by the name of Noah. He saves himself from the deluge, from the Mabul. But our rabbis aren't very satisfied with this character. Why? Because he only saved his family. What about the rest of humankind? Why didn't he influence anybody else to follow in his footsteps? And they say that was wrong with him. You see Abraham, on the other hand, when one of the emissaries of God tells him, I'm going to destroy the cities of Sodom and Amorah, Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham says, how are you going to do this? Is the judge of the entire world going to commit an injustice? True. His nephew Lot was there, but he could have saved him. No, but he prays for everybody. He wants the entire city to be saved, both cities to be saved, because he feels responsibility not only toward his brother, he feels responsibility toward mankind as well. So maybe the festivity of Pesach comes to remind us that we are created in God's image, that we have to assume responsibility, that we have to feel for our brother as well, and also for mankind at large, because the message of Pesach is really a universal message. It's not only the Jewish people that merit freedom. Every human being merits to be free in this world.